Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, and welcome to another HRO Today Educational Podcast. I'm Elliot Clark, the CEO of HRO Today. We publish HRO Today Magazine, HRO Today EMEA, and HRO Today APAC, as well as produce the HRO Today Forum and events held around the world, and we're the managers of the HRO Today Association. Today, we're going to talk about infrastructure. Not the most compelling word, but really important to HR and talent acquisition. And infrastructure is a combination of your technology, your partners, your internal team, etc. We all know that. Recently, I attended the HRO Today Forum North America. We had more than 50 CHROs and another probably 30, 40 heads of talent acquisition. And I discussed with this group our CHRO Top Concerns report. The audience confirmed that while some companies seem to be anticipating growth, a little bit of growth here and there, few were expecting significant growth, and the EMEA region is expecting little. However, most of them seemed concerned about the ability of their TA function to shift quickly or agilely between fast growth or reducing their capacity to quickly accommodate slower growth. The infrastructure was neither sized appropriately or flexible. I asked one of our provider attendees about these comments, and I liked his answer so much that I forced him to be my guest on my podcast. Grant Jessup is the Global Head of Sales and Solutions at LevelUP Human Capital Solutions. Grant has had more than a decade of experience as a senior executive working for leading RPO and workforce services providers like LevelUP or talent technology software companies, as well as having started his career in TA as a recruiter, both supporting TA activities and using the tech himself. Grant, welcome to the podcast. Anything you'd like to add about LevelUP HCS for our audience?
First of all, Elliot, it's always a pleasure to converse with you and speak with the HRO Today audience. In terms of LevelUP, I suppose, for those that don't know us, we're one of the largest minority-owned talent solution providers in the world, delivering a range of services. And fundamentally, we help organizations build TA functions that are genuinely resilient. So they're flexible enough to scale up, scale down, and ultimately stay ahead. So that's a bit about us. And again, thank you for having me.
I'm going to give you the title of Senior Vice President of Segues because that was a beautiful segue to my first question, Grant. So we talk about resilience, and we spoke about this topic. You said that most TA infrastructure in both large and mid-sized enterprises were built for a hiring pace that no longer exists. When they were conceived, it was for a pace that does not exist. And you used that word resiliency that you just used a moment ago. They lack the resilience to quickly adapt. Why don't you explain to our audience what this problem is and why some companies struggle because they're both sized wrong and they can't quickly adapt to the changing market conditions? What's your view of why this problem exists?
Well, look, I think firstly, as soon as I get off the podcast, I'll be adding SVP of Segways onto my LinkedIn. So thank you for that title.
There you go.
I think our conversation was largely based on my conversation with a number of CHROs and TA leaders across the globe. I think, the feedback that we are told is that the problem's largely a legacy of the 2021, 2022 hiring boom. Companies scaled their internal TA teams, tech stacks, processes for high velocity, high volume, and the market shifted. And if we're honest, most companies didn't adjust. They didn't adjust their TA teams. Many of the people we speak to and have spoken to in the past were in a kind of sit and see kind of mode, hoping that the good times would return. I think the other thing is that there's a deeper issue when we look at it. And when we start to unpick and look at some of the legacy solutions that have been built with partners, we find that deeper issue is that the TA functions are largely fixed cost models. So, headcount, technology contracts, process workflows, they're all built for a specific cadence. And so particularly when hiring decelerates, those costs don't disappear, but the output does. And, conversely, when hiring accelerates, again, unexpectedly, the infrastructure is hard to scale at a fast pace, and there's a significant lag time. In some instances, when we've spoken to customers that we work with, you know, before we came in, there were typically 60 to 90 days to ramp a recruiter. Imagine going to the CEO and saying, hey, we need 60 to 90 days to sign this or do this. And, you know, it wouldn't be acceptable. So I think that there's two things really kind of competing with each other. And then, you know, the kind of persistent macroeconomic volatility. We all talked about this. We all know about this. And I think that buyers are, placing greater emphasis on agility and value realization than just capacity.
When they talk about infrastructure, the CHROs and the heads of TA, there's a juxtaposition. We're talking about in the world of economics. We used to go to have a view of the economics was cyclical. You had busts followed by booms, followed by busts. Now the economists are debating whether we're event driven. A headline can drive, a particular perception of the future and then planning to that future. But companies don't even seem to be very good, at least in my observation, if they're shifting strategy, if they're going through reorganization, if they're opening new facility, adding products. So, part of it is, I think the way TA is set up, where you've got so many desks, you're trying to keep them full or busy. What do you think, is this a workforce planning problem, or is it really an architecture problem, or is it an attitudinal problem that once HR's got things set, they have a difficult time adjusting? Or is it a partner problem where some of your competitors, claim, if I look at the website of everyone in this market, the word flexibility appears on every website, but they're really not very good at adapting mid-deal to up and down cycles with their customers? Tough question. It's a lot in there.
There's a lot to unpack. Yeah, I suppose there's a lot to unpack there. I suppose, look, there's a couple of things that stick out. I think that point around kind of HR building a process, a procedure, and kind of sticking to it. I'll answer that first. I think that there's a meaningful cohort of organizations who confuse stability with resilience, and really they haven't been tested yet, or they're tested, but they attributed the failure to the market rather than their own model. And the telltale sign is usually when a company says, we just need to hire faster, rather than we need to examine why our system can't respond to what the market's doing. For me, that's an organizational equivalent of blaming traffic for being late when you left the house at the wrong time. That's that part. On the partner point, I'll pick that one up as well. Look, I think that the legacy models, the traditional firms in this space have built years of experience on process management, outsourcing. And there is a interesting, time at the moment where a lot of the feedback we're getting from partners who are approaching us is, really questioning, how do we help them flex? How do we ensure that they've got the flexibility and agility to respond to the market challenges? Now, really and truthfully, I think that is the biggest question of today. And each business and each organization that we work with will have different reasons as to why they aren't able to deliver agility and flexibility at pace. There are, every organization operates differently in different models, different motions. And so it's hard to pin it down to one thing. What I would say, though, is, it is not a question anymore of outsource your recruiting. The question now is, how do I build a talent architecture that has deliberate flex points? And so you're not exposed as a HR or TA leader to huge surges, or even worse, huge slowdowns.
All right, so that's, you sort of anticipated once again, as the executive vice president, I've just given you a promotion of segues to my next question, which is, how can the client side, the buy side, HR, be both more resilient and more flexible or agile to anticipate these moments of volatility? So I hear what LevelUP is doing and how you're set up, and how some of your, and I don't want to put you in a position of bad mouthing competitors, but Some of them are not terribly flexible. What should, you've done literally dozens of these programs through your shop. What would you advise or recommend to a new client coming to you for them to think about to be more agile and resilient so they can bolt on to your type solution and be able to move at the speed that LevelUP moves?
Yeah, this is a great question, and I feel like you're a client in the buying room with me, and I'm here pitching, and I'll try and make it less salesy and more informed. But
You were still in
fundamentally,
elementary school when I sold my first RPO deal, Graham. Go ahead.
so look, I think there's three things that the right model solves for customers. There's three key things. First is that there's a variable cost structure, right? We need to move away from the fixed cost structure and think about a variable cost structure. Being able to convert a largely fixed TA cost into a variable one is of huge and significant value. The businesses need the freedom to scale hiring in a boom or slump without long-term obligations. And, a partner like us or others need to offer that, whether the team needs someone to respond to the surge or the slowdown. We need to be able to react to that. Now, the reason why we can react to that is because we're able to redeploy our resources probably much faster in other contracts with different cyclical surges. And so, I think that is what a partnership with someone like us will solve in the first instance. The second piece is anticipation and not reaction, right? Like I think a lot of people are reacting rather than anticipating. I think the best RPO partners bring in workforce intelligence, focusing really on the key things that are important from an intelligence perspective: labor market data, pipeline analytics, hiring signals. And so companies can get ahead of volatility rather than just respond to it. I think the other thing that we're seeing, certainly from an enterprise level perspective, is expectations have expanded. Buyers increasingly seek consultative advice and guidance, workforce insights, technology enabled hiring modules, and even modular project-based constructs. Those, again, will offer agility in uncertain times. But fundamentally, if you've got a model that's reacting, then you're largely just driving a process and you're not really answering all of the challenges for the customer. And then the third piece is you need to find, and this is probably quite an obvious one, but you need to find a partner that has proven results at scale. I think it's quite easy to build agile project-based modular programs for smaller organizations or smaller projects. And I always talk about an example of, I won't name the client for confidentiality reasons, but they probably listen to this podcast and will know who they are. But there was a time about 18 months ago where, the direction had changed from the CEO. They had to bolster go-to-market commercial and development teams very rapidly, something in the region of 1,000 heads. And so they came to us as their partner and said, right, we need to scale. We need 40 heads. Let's go. And, we had to respond to that. 2 weeks later, they had over anticipated. And we as a partner had to scale down back to 10. And so, if a partner can do that, then they're a flexible, proven, agile. The slowdown is the harder one to react to than the surge. And I think proven results at scale for a slowdown is a really key aspect for looking at a partnership. I suppose, the final point on this is, look, I believe resilience in talent acquisition isn't about, having more recruiters on standby. It's not about the resource model. It's about building a model where cost, capability, capacity of your TA function can move with the market and not lag behind it. The companies that we see that do this well treat their TA partners as part of their workforce architecture and not as a vendor, when that, for example, they call when something breaks. And so that's the bottom line, I would say, in terms of partnering for resilience.
Well, it's a great point. And scaling down when you're using permanent, full-time, in-house recruiters, depending on the country you're in, depending on the regulatory environment. I'm trying to say the British style because of your accent, Grant. But those fixed elements to scale up and down, it's almost impossible with a fixed infrastructure. So having this adjunct flexible capability as part of the model, is obviously going to work much better. We are running out of time here, but this is an interesting conversation, an interesting philosophical point, because I think the default couture during the big boom and the quote unquote great resignation was to massively increase in-house recruiting. And, corporate recruiting became one of the hottest job categories on the big, job boards like Indeed, etc. Now we've seen it go the other way. There's considerable layoffs and very painful transitions where they could have avoided that by using a firm like LevelUP. So, or one of your brethren. All right. Well, Grant, thank you so much for taking part in the podcast. We will have to have you back to continue this conversation.
Yeah.
Appreciate your time and look forward to doing it again.
Thanks, Elliot, and thanks to the team. I could speak for hours, so hopefully it's been helpful for those listening, and I would always love to come back.
All right. Well, we will do that. Thank you to Grant Jessup, who's the Global Head of Sales and Solutions at LevelUP Human Capital Solutions. And to our audience, thank you for your time and attention. And we look forward to you joining us on another HRO Today Educational Podcast.